Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with some sequels to Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde, that unique, earth-shattering, fabulous combination of song cycle and symphony. And I've selected 7 or 8, I don't know, I gotta count, 7 or 8 works by later composers who could be said to build on the achievement of Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde. Now, we have to understand that Das Lied von der Erde is an incredibly original piece. It is a song cycle, of course. It consists of 6 songs, but it's also a symphony because those songs are interrelated, and there is a process of thematic transformation and development that operates throughout the cycle. And also, there's a certain progression in terms of mood, in the sequence of moods and images created by the poetry. And the relationship isn't just musical, it's also textual. It's about loneliness, it's about abandonment, it's about farewell, which of course is given most eloquent expression in the final farewell. So there are all kinds of interrelationships which justify Mahler's designation of the work as a symphony for alto and baritone and tenor, or baritone and tenor, really better alto and tenor, let's not kid ourselves, and large orchestra. Mahler never heard the work, It really is such an extraordinary piece. And I did a talk about it anyway, so you can go check that out if you want. But here are some very, very interesting works, some of which you may be obvious and you'll know about them. Others may be new to you that you might want to check out if you like Das Lied von der Erde. So first, and perhaps most obviously, we need to just mention Zemlinsky's Lyrische Symphony, his lyric symphony. This has been recorded now about a dozen times. And Zemlinsky wrote it in 1922-ish, and he admitted, he said, I'm writing something along the same lines or similar lines as Das Lied von der Erde. The poetry is by Rabindranath Tagore, so it follows also Das Lied von der Erde's exploitation of a certain exoticism, perhaps fatalism, of the sort of Eastern philosophy. And it's a wonderful work. It really is. It's quite beautiful. It's for soprano and baritone. It starts out with, I'm miserable, I'm wandering in far off places, and it all goes downhill from there. What's not to love? Seriously. Terrific, terrific piece of music. I'm not going to go into recommending recordings so much, unless there's only one, because I just want to talk about the repertoire. I want to tell you about the pieces. And some of these pieces will be the topics of their own talks. Some of them already have been. So I'm not too worried about the actual issue with performances. There aren't really many bad ones of any of these pieces either. So we're safe. I want to tell you about the music and urge you to explore the music and turn you loose to do it on your own. Anyway, this particular performance that I had is Ricardo Chailly with the Concertgebouw. It's fabulous, but so many people have done it, and very, very well, starting with, Michael Gielen did it, Lauren Mazel did it on DG. There's actually another one, Sinopoli did it on DG. James Conlon did it for Warner, EMI Warner. You can find the work rather simply. There's a good one on Naxos, so not a problem. Not a problem at all. But Alexander Zemlinsky's Lyric Symphony is the most obvious in terms of proximity and style sequel after Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde. And so that's number 1. Number 2, this is totally in another planet stylistically. And I've already done a video about this work, but I want to talk about it again because it's just so fantastic. Turina, the Gran Torino. No, Joaquin Turina's Canto a Sevilla, Song of Seville. Boy, is this a great piece. This is such a great piece. And I urge you to take a look at the video I did about it. But I just want to mention it again because it is a huge symphonic cycle for soprano and orchestra, or actually mezzo-soprano and orchestra, in alternating movements, orchestral and vocal. It's just gorgeous. And it is symphonic. One of the things that makes something symphonic, let's just say, because, there are millions of song cycles and orchestral song cycles. Think of not just by Mahler, but Benjamin Britten's song cycles, which are heavily influenced by Mahler's and many other people's too. But what makes it, I think, symphonic is a certain weight and a certain size, just sheer length. Because I think what happens, quite frankly, is that when a work gets longer than a certain, like half an hour or 35 minutes, composers naturally want to find ways to sort of link it together, to create relationships between the different parts. Canto a Sevilla has that. It has a very nice recapitulatory finale. And I think that, that sort of gives the whole thing that sense of symphonic weight, just the sheer size of the thing. So if you don't know Turina's Canto a Sevilla, you really should. And here's a case where this Chandos recording, it's the only modern recording worth getting. There's one on Hensler that's not as good as this. It's not bad. You'll get a sense of the work. It's not as good as this one. And you can really get the essence of the piece this way. Before this, really, you were limited to Victoria de Los Angeles in mono on Warner, and then there was one on I think Arte Nova from the Gran Canaria people, which also wasn't too bad. But this is head and shoulders above the rest. It's with Maria Espada soprano, the BBC Philharmonic, and Juanjo Mena, and it's great. And you really, really owe it to yourself to hear it. Next, another serious Mahler follower, and a piece that has a certain mystique about it. Shostakovich's 14th Symphony for soprano and bass and string orchestra and percussion. Now, this symphony is 11 poems all about death. What could be more fun than that? Oh, I love the second movement. Smert ušlājis taverni. Death entered and left the tavern. And oh, it's just so cool. It's a Lorca poem, by the way. Absolutely marvelous. Marvelous, marvelous stuff. Fantastic settings of really gripping and gloomy poetry, but the contrasts are really quite wide. The music is often achingly lyrical, incredibly beautiful, and what can I say? It's a great work. Absolutely a great work. And so if you like Das Lied von der Erde and you've got some cojones and you're into something sort of not going to cheer you up, Shostakovich's 14th is just the ticket. I have to tell you a little story about this symphony. I have a very dear friend who was having some marital issues with his wife. And I happened to be at his home staying over on a visit, and Mother's Day came along, and we had tickets to go see a concert. And I said to him, listen, don't take me. I'll stay home and watch the kids. Take your wife. It's Mother's Day. I felt bad. They were having problems. They eventually got divorced. I think this is why, because it turns out that on the program was Shostakovich's 14th Symphony, which is just the ticket for a Mother's Day celebration, don't you think? There is a song about incest, so I suppose it's appropriate for Mother's Day, don't you think? Oh my God! I think that was an event that greatly contributed to the final collapse of their marriage. So don't go see Shostakovich's 14th on Mother's Day. Don't take your mom or significant other as a special treat. You may be giving them unwittingly a message that wouldn't be very smart to convey, but in all other respects, of course, it's a magnificent symphony. You'll have to excuse me. That was the vacuuming going out in the hallway, so I had to take a little break while they got done vacuuming. I want to stay with Shostakovich for a moment, however, because there is another work by Shostakovich of truly symphonic dimensions that I think is clearly influenced by Das Lied von der Erde. Really influenced by Das Lied von der Erde, and quite extraordinary and very little known. Of course, Shostakovich people know it, and it's been recorded rather frequently, but people just don't hear about it. It was his last major completed work. And this is the suite on verses by Michelangelo. It is glorious. This is for bass and orchestra. The texts were not given titles by Michelangelo, but Shostakovich actually gave them titles, and I think that they're significant. I mean, let me just run down the list for you. That is Truth, Mourning, Love, Separation, Wrath, Dante, To the Exile, Creativity, Night, Death, and Immortality. It's absolutely a haunting, beautiful, beautiful work with wonderful, wonderful poems. I mean, they're really terrific. And Shostakovich set them magnificently in that spare, sort of haunting late style of his. And the end of it, Immortality, is so similar in some respects to the ending of Das Lied von der Erde. You know, the simplicity of the melody, the sound of harp and celesta sort of tinkling off into eternity. You really know where you are in this music if you know Das Lied von der Erde. And as I said, it's been recorded many times, and it's going to be the subject of its very own talk. It really deserves it because it's such a great, great piece. And I'll be able to play samples from recordings. So I'm going to save it for then. But I do want to urge you, if you don't know Shostakovich's Suite on Verses of Michelangelo, he could have called it his 16th Symphony very, very easily. I mean, it has that kind of substance, and it's amazing. It's simply amazing. This one that I was holding up, by the way, is the Ondine recording with Gerald Finley and Thomas Sanderling with the Helsinki Philharmonic. It's a great performance. It renders the poems in the original Italian, which is a little... I mean, you could have an argument about it. I think it works beautifully. It's a magnificent performance. Don't get me wrong, but I don't understand why it is that with Shostakovich's, 14th Symphony and also, some of his other song cycles that are based on poetry that was originally in other languages, people don't just leave it alone. I mean, because Shostakovich's setting of Russian was fabulous. And not only that, Russian is a glorious language. I mean, I learned it, I speak it, I love Russian, and I love the Russian language, and I love the way it sounds musically. And Shostakovich's settings are so perfect. So why mess with them by trying to retranslate it back into some other language? I mean, it's just, it doesn't achieve anything, let's put it that way. I don't think it hurts either terribly. I mean, it really doesn't, but it's pointless. And I think that to hear it in the original language gives the whole performance a tang of authenticity that you otherwise don't get. So, Shostakovich's Suite on Verses by Michelangelo, you must hear it. And it is definitely a sequel to Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde. Also, a fascinating one that just came out just recently is, get this, Penderecky's Sixth. Now, Penderecki, this is, I think, the first recording of it, too. This is with lots of Polish people whose names I can't pronounce. The Polish Chamber Philharmonic Orchestra of Sopot, the Polska Philharmonia Kameralna Sopot, with Wojciech Rajski, conductor, and Stephen Gens, baritone. And it also has, this is amazing, absolutely amazing, the Concerto for Clarinet, Strings, Percussion, and Celesta. I just did the talk on modern clarinet concertos. So here's another one. It's on the Dux label. Is this Dux or is it Accord? No, it's Accord. CD Accord. I'm sorry. I must be honest about it. Get this right, because the CD Accord people I know, and they will kill me. So it's CD Accord. It's a marvelous disc. Also deserves a talk of its own, which it will receive in due course. But the interesting thing about Pandoretsky Sixth is that it's subtitled Chinese Songs, and the Chinese songs in question come from the same source as Mahler's Chinese songs for Das Lied von der Erde. That is Hans Betke's, the Chinese flute, and other translations and adaptations of Chinese poetry. Now, the Sixth is interesting because Penderecki did not write his symphonies in order. He planned them all out and then sort of filled in the gaps. So the Sixth was actually his last symphony. This was the final symphony in his series. It's a beautiful, beautiful work. And it also has a part for an erhu. That's that Chinese sort of violin-like object that you kind of hear in those, Naxos Asian music discs where they have erhu concerti and things like that. There's also an erhu project, music for piano and erhu, coming out of Canada. I mean, it's amazing. We're such an international world nowadays, aren't we? But Penderecky Sixth is really self-evidently modeled on Das Lied von der Erde, and it is a lovely, wonderful work. And so is the Concerto for Clarinet, Strings, Percussion, and Celesta on CD Accord. Give it some serious thought. I'll try and give it even more serious thought. I'm trying to get permission to play samples, and then we can talk about it more. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I really do. Next, here's another one that you probably won't think about. That's really an underrated piece of music. Fantastic. Bernstein's Songfest. Now, Bernstein, of course, recorded it on Deutsche Grammophon. Leonard Slatkin recorded it. This is the Naxos recording with the Wolf Trap Opera Singers and the National Orchestral Institute Philharmonic under James Judd. It's very well done. Songfest is terrific. It began life as a collection of individual songs, and Bernstein jammed them together and made a single work out of it, which is what Bernstein did for a lot of his compositions, because, you know, that was the way he operated. I just think this is a terrific piece. The poetry is beautifully chosen. It's 43 minutes long. It involves 6 soloists, I believe. Yeah, I think 6. And I just love the work. And I really wish that it got more credit than it deserves. I think the problem is getting 6 singers together to do it. It's not easy. It's not easy to find a cast, you know, willing to come and sing for just a couple minutes each. But it's a wonderful piece. A very wonderful piece, and it would never have taken the form it does had it not been for Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde. No question about that. Also, here's a piece that you probably know, but it's very, very interesting because people tend not to think about it anymore. It had its 15 minutes of fame, if you know what I mean, and since then no one seems to care. Gorecki's Third Symphony. This is the Symphony of Sorrowful Songs. It contains 3 songs for soprano and strings, largely, I guess, and it's set in the composer's sort of reformed neo-minimalist avant-garde-ish idiom. It was a glorious work. It was the Nonsuch recording, with Dawn Upshaw, that sold millions of copies. This is the Naxos version with Anthony Witt and Sofia Kilanovitz soprano, which is absolutely fabulous. It's as great as any of them. And I got to say, it's a beautiful work. It holds up really well 20 years later, whenever it was from when it first achieved its smash of stardom. And again, it's a work that it's a song symphony, a clearly song symphony, and hence a marvelous sequel to Das Lied von der Erde. And you may have forgotten all about it. It's really funny, isn't it? How these things come and go. And it really did make a splash. And, how often do we talk about Gorecki since then? But he wrote beautiful music, quite a bit of it. And this, his Third Symphony, deserved the popularity it received at the time, and it deserves not to be forgotten as a worthy sequel to Das Lied von der Erde. However, there is one last number that I would like to tell you about, and this is one, I really doubt you haven't heard of it, but it's really a good piece and totally in the footsteps of Das Lied von der Erde. And this is Stephen Douglas Burton's Second Symphony, Ariel. Stephen Douglas Burton is an American composer, and most of his symphonies are vocal works, and they're all sort of, in the footsteps of Das Lied von der Erde. Now, Ariel sets 5 poems by Sylvia Plath. You know what I mean? Sylvia Plath, the bell jar, the crazy, suicidal Sylvia Plath, and gripping poems they are. They are really, really heavy-duty, serious poems. I love Sylvia Plath's poetry. It is extraordinarily cutting, gut-wrenching stuff. It really is. And setting it to music, I think, takes a certain amount of balls, try and do it justice. And just get the titles. There are 5 poems here. This is for soprano and baritone. And there's only one recording of it. It's on Bridge Records currently. It's on Bridge Records with the Syracuse Symphony Orchestra under Christopher Keane. It was made right after the premiere of the symphony. with Diane Curry, mezzo-soprano, and Stephen Dixon, baritone. There we go. And the poems are Ariel, the night dances, and then Contusion, fever 103 degrees. That's cheerful. And then Paralytic. You see, the mood only gets brighter. And then Daddy. Oh, what a great poem Daddy is. Daddy, of course, has the most wonderfully resonant line in probably all of American poetry. That line is, "Every woman adores a fascist." Now, there's a line that's going to set people talking at your next party if you bring that one up. And then finally, The Moon and the Yew Tree. It's quite an extraordinary piece. And like I said, it's on Bridge Records. And if you can find it, it's available. I know it's available. And if you're into the Das Lied von der Erde tradition of symphonic writing, Stephen Douglas Burton's Second Symphony is absolutely going to be your cup of tea. It really will be. It's amazing. And I'm also going to see if I can get some permission to play some samples and do some stuff with that too, because I think it's a great piece. I really do. I first heard it when I was in college, and it wasn't on Bridge at that time. I forget even what label it was originally on. And I'm so happy that Bridge got it and rescued it from oblivion. So there you have it. I mean, I think really we've covered quite a range of music, an extraordinary range of music, all of which is rooted in the example of Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde. Big, meaty, symphonic song cycles that have symphonic dimensions. It's a wonderful sort of subset of our musical tradition, and something that you can really sink your teeth into. You know what I mean? So keep on listening, folks. Have a good time with these sequels to Das Lied von der Erde. Take care.